Thanks, Meg. I'm going to make just 3 comments on the report, trying to keep things brief, especially as the last speaker, to make sure there's time for discussion. And what I want to do really is zoom back out. So we've looked in some detail at courts and human rights and how ministers should be treated. And I want to just zoom out and try and attach some of that to some of the broader party political questions that are in the ether as well. So first of all, the issue of low trust. I mean, I don't imagine there's anybody here or, participants that are in any way surprised that you find low trust. But I think it's worth stressing just how low that trust has been over the last 12 months. So about a similar time to when your survey was conducted, Ipsos recorded just over 1 in 4, in fact, saying that lack of faith in government was one of the most important issues facing the country. Now, that has declined a little bit since June 22, but that I think largely reflects all the other issues facing the country rather than people suddenly regaining their faith in government. But it's still high. It's still around 1 in 5, giving that as one of the most important issues. And one of the things I thought was particularly interesting about that was that it wasn't particularly young people that were saying that. It was across all the age groups. So there's definitely something in that lack of faith in government that your data points to, and that then, as Hannah and Joe have talked about, there's potential ways of how can we rebuild that trust? Can we rebuild that trust, and how would we go about it? But I think there's also some other questions there to dig into around, the extent to which it's party specific. Is it a kind of government opposition thing? So we know that the current government is polling very low. Would that itself be kind of tangling up into this? So there's some of those issues to unravel as well. Hannah pointed to the kind of quite high levels of agreement in terms of how ministers should be handled. There was more than 50% in most cases saying that it should be an independent review. So in some areas, there seems to be quite a lot of agreement about how we could tackle things. But what I noticed, and I'm going off of what Alan, away from what Alan presented here, but what I noticed in the report is that when you start talking about what I'm kind of putting under the umbrella of big ticket constitutional reform, so PR, reform of the Lords, stuff around local politics, it's a much more mixed picture. And even amongst, it splits by party as you might expect, but even amongst Labour Party supporters, the responses to those issues are still mixed. So I think for any party that's looking at trying to rebuild trust through those kind of big ticket issues, the data perhaps tells them to tread carefully, because actually you've got to take people with you and they're not all quite there yet. So I think that's another thing that comes out of the data. And my own particular interests at the moment are around political participation and different groups of people and who participates and who has voice. And you've got lots of data on that in the report that, again, Alan didn't have time to go through here. But what that seemed to raise was that actually there's not very many people who want to participate more in politics than they currently do. And that outside of voting in general elections, participation is quite low. And it seemed that the reason for that was that they didn't feel they could make a difference. Most people who said they didn't want to participate more was because they didn't think it would make a difference. But I think you in the report break that down by EU referendum vote and party, but underlying those differences are differences of age and education and class and ethnicity in who participates and in what. And I think that's something that's really important to come out of the report in terms of when we're trying to put into place reforms and we're trying to give people more voice to perhaps build up trust in politics. It tends to be those who have high trust in politics who then participate. And how do we break that cycle or do something differently so that actually you're engaging people who are starting off with low trust? Otherwise, all you're doing is kind of reinforcing the existing divides. So those were the 3 kind of bigger issues that I picked out of it, and how we can then build those into programs that might change things and change both the levels of trust, who has a voice, and what that would mean in terms of those big questions of constitutional reform. I hope that's okay.